Brave dwarf mongoose.
Yeah.
Oh my god! Yeah.
Can you imagine living in a place where a simple walk through the forest could turn into a life or death struggle? For decades, in certain regions of Japan, the bites of the feared Habu snake were a constant threat. These snakes, known for their lethal venom and aggressive nature, caused hundreds of bites each year, leaving rural inhabitants in danger. In the 1980s, statistics showed that around 400 people were bitten annually, with many suffering severe complications, including death. Although antivenoms existed, the lack of electricity and proper storage in rural areas made it difficult to access them in critical moments. Installing infrastructure was costly and slow, leaving these communities with few options to deal with the threat. Japan, determined to solve the problem, came up with a radical idea: introduce an animal capable of hunting these snakes and being immune to their venom. But, as often happens with seemingly perfect solutions, the plan did not go as expected. Today, we will explore this fascinating story, the unexpected twists that arose, and why, 25 years later, the world is still shocked by the consequences. So, get ready for a journey full of ingenuity, mistakes, and lessons that have shaped history. Imagine bringing the perfect predator to solve a problem and ending up with two. That's exactly what happened on the island of Amami Oshima, where an innovative idea ended up causing an unexpected disaster. In 1979, Japan decided to introduce 30 Asian mongooses to deal with the Habu snakes, a venomous species that threatened the island's inhabitants. Additionally, the mongooses had a second mission: control the rat population that was proliferating in the area. This plan, seemingly brilliant, appeared to be the perfect solution. After all, mongooses are famous for hunting cobras, close relatives of the Habu, but what happened next left everyone stunned. The mongooses ignored the snakes and began wreaking havoc on the ecosystem. The logic behind this decision was solid, at least on paper. Mongooses are quick and agile predators, known for their ability to confront venomous snakes. Their biological adaptations, such as natural resistance to venom and the ability to dodge lethal strikes, make them specialized hunters. Moreover, they reproduce rapidly, ensuring that their population would grow large enough to control both the Habu and the rats. But there was a problem no one anticipated. The Habu and the mongooses never crossed paths. While Habu are nocturnal, active only at night, mongooses are diurnal and prefer to hunt in daylight. This incompatibility in activity times meant that encounters were practically non-existent. And what happens when a predator can't find its prey? It looks for other options. Although mongooses were designed to confront snakes, they chose an easier route. Instead of hunting Habu, they began attacking native species on the island, including birds and small mammals that had no natural defenses against such a predator. Meanwhile, the Habu continued to reproduce and cause problems in the local communities, exactly what the plan was meant to prevent. Moreover, the mongoose population began to grow uncontrollably. In less than 2 decades, the initial population of 30 individuals turned into an invasion of over 10,000 animals by the year 2000. This surge had a devastating impact on the ecosystem. The mongooses displaced native species, disrupted food chains, and endangered several endemic species. Although mongooses are famous for hunting cobras, attacking a venomous snake requires considerable effort. Like cobras, Habu are dangerous prey, and capturing them can result in injury or even death. For mongooses, there were much safer and more accessible options: mice, rabbits, and birds. These prey posed no risk, making them far more attractive. It's like having the option of cooking an elaborate meal or simply opening a fast food package. Naturally, the mongooses chose the fast food. This left the Habu practically untouched and free to continue causing problems. But what happens when the solution to one problem creates an even bigger one? By 1993, Japan's Ministry of the Environment was already alarmed by the exponential growth of the mongooses. Instead of reducing the snake threat, they had become a new problem. Their impact on the island's biodiversity was devastating. Many species of birds and small mammals endemic to the island, which were not accustomed to predators like mongooses, began to disappear. Amami Oshima, known for its rich biodiversity, was at risk of losing much of its native fauna. Moreover, the rats, another target of the mongooses, hadn't been significantly controlled either. The plan, which had initially seemed like an ingenious solution, had failed miserably. By the year 2000, the Japanese government launched a massive program to eradicate the mongoose population. This effort included the deployment of specialized traps designed to capture only mongooses without harming other species. Toxic baits and search dogs were also used to track the animals in remote areas. The process was long and costly, but it eventually paid off. By April 2018, the last mongoose was captured on the island, and since then, no new cases have been reported. Today, the Ministry of the Environment celebrates the successful eradication of the mongooses on Amami Oshima, but not without reflecting on the lessons learned. Since 2005, the efforts to eradicate the mongooses on Amami Oshima were not just the responsibility of the authorities. Local hunting squads, made up of volunteers, farmers, and experts, ventured into the forests and mountains to capture these animals. Armed with traps and strategies developed over years, they worked tirelessly to protect their home and the fragile ecosystem of the island. The effort was monumental. Millions of yen were invested, countless hours of work were spent, and the community showed remarkable dedication. But was all this sacrifice really worth it? The answer is a resounding yes, and the reason lies in the unique vulnerability of Amami Oshima's endemic species. Instead of fulfilling their original purpose, reducing the Habu snake population, the mongooses became the main enemy of the island's endemic species. Among their victims was the Amami rabbit, an animal known as a living fossil because it is the last remnant of an ancient species of Asian rabbits. This rabbit, which once inhabited large areas of the Asian continent, can now only be found on two small islands, Amami Oshima and Tokunoshima. With the arrival of the mongooses, the population of these rabbits drastically declined. These animals were unprepared to face such an agile and adaptable predator. By 2000, their habitat had been reduced by 40%, and their survival was in imminent danger. The Amami rabbit was not the only species affected. The Ryukyu rat, another endemic species of the island, also suffered a dramatic decline due to the mongooses. This species, once abundant in the island's forests, now faces a significant risk of extinction. In total, 15 endemic species of Amami Oshima were directly harmed. And the consequences were not limited to wildlife. The agricultural sector also felt the impact. The mongooses attacked poultry on farms, consumed fruits from crops, and, in the process, spread diseases among domestic animals. These creatures, introduced with good intentions, became a major economic and ecological problem. The case of Amami Oshima highlights a critical fact. Island ecosystems are extremely fragile. Unlike continental ecosystems, where species have evolved to coexist with multiple predators, islands often harbor fauna that is unprepared to face new dangers. This explains why the introduction of a predator like the mongoose caused so much damage in such a short time. These creatures, which eat nearly anything they can catch easily, found an environment full of defenseless prey and adapted rapidly. With no natural restrictions to limit their expansion, they spread like a plague, disrupting the balance of the entire ecosystem. Eradicating an invasive species is not an easy task, and the case of the mongooses on Amami Oshima proves it. It took nearly 25 years to reduce their population enough to declare it under control, and almost half a century to complete the project. This long period emphasizes the importance of acting swiftly when an invasive species begins to establish itself in a new territory. Allowing the mongooses to remain unchecked would have led to the extinction of several endemic species, in addition to causing irreparable economic losses. That's why, even though the eradication of thousands of mongooses might seem drastic, it was the only solution to protect the island's unique ecosystem. For those who follow our stories, the impact of invasive species is not a surprise. But if you're new to this topic, it's important to understand something. When an invasive species reaches a new area, acting quickly is crucial. If the initial moment to control it is missed, the ecological and economic costs soar, and in some cases, it may be impossible to reverse the damage. Amami Oshima is not the only region that has faced this challenge, but its story offers an invaluable lesson. The introduction of mongooses, although well-intentioned, had disastrous consequences. However, the coordinated action of the authorities and the local community demonstrated that, while difficult, it is possible to restore balance to an ecosystem. Japan achieved a unique milestone by completely eradicating mongooses from Amami Oshima Island. This achievement is especially significant because it marks the first time in the world that mongooses have been eradicated on such a large island. Generally, the larger the area to be cleared, the more difficult it is to eradicate an invasive species. Therefore, the success on Amami Oshima represents a triumph of strategic planning, coordinated action, and persistence. The key to success was acting within a small window of time. If the mongooses had continued to reproduce unchecked, their eradication might have become impossible. This case adds to the few documented successes in mongoose eradication globally, but it stands out because it involved a large island, which increased the complexity of the challenge. Interestingly, while the mongoose invasion was being fought, another problem began to resolve independently: Habu snake bites. By 2020, the number of cases had dramatically dropped to only 60 per year, a far cry from the alarming numbers of past decades. This change is not attributed to the mongooses, but to a series of measures implemented by the local communities. For example, the inhabitants began adopting preventive practices, such as using protective gear and reducing nocturnal activities in high-risk areas. Additionally, access to antivenom improved significantly, with more efficient distribution systems allowing for rapid treatment of victims. The impact of these improvements is notable. Since 1992, no deaths from Habu snake bites have been recorded on the island. Although snakes remain a threat, the mortality associated with them has become a manageable issue. Despite the success on Amami Oshima, the mongoose threat has not disappeared in Japan. In Okinawa, where these predators were introduced 70 years earlier than on Amami Oshima, they still represent a significant challenge. Conditions in Okinawa are even more favorable for mongooses, with a warmer climate and proximity to their natural habitat. This has allowed their population to grow steadily, especially in the central and southern regions of the island, where control is more complicated. To contain them, specialized fences have been installed in northern Okinawa. These structures, designed with an L-shaped base, prevent mongooses from digging and crossing over. Although not tall, these fences have proven effective, as mongooses typically do not climb. However, the risk of mongooses from Okinawa invading Amami Oshima again remains a constant concern. If that were to happen, it would be necessary to restart the entire eradication process, something Japan cannot afford. The case of Amami Oshima highlights a universal problem. Island ecosystems are extremely vulnerable to invasive species. Islands often harbor unique species that have not developed mechanisms to defend themselves against external predators. The mongooses, with their ability to adapt and hunt a wide variety of prey, found these islands to be the perfect environment to thrive. However, their presence had disastrous consequences, from reducing biodiversity to disrupting local food chains. The introduction of one species to control another is a practice known as biological control, and it has been successfully used in many cases. For example, in agriculture, farmers often release predatory insects to protect crops from pests, with positive results. However, the case of the mongooses in Japan demonstrates the dangers of not considering all factors. Before releasing a predator into a new environment, it is essential to conduct thorough research to assess its impact on other species and the ecosystem as a whole. In the case of Amami Oshima, the introduction of mongooses was a well-intentioned mistake that left behind important lessons. Although eradication was possible, the process was long, costly, and required a monumental effort from multiple sectors. The small Asian mongoose is an emblematic example of how a seemingly simple solution can unleash a series of unforeseen problems. Over time, this small predator has been introduced to countries like Cuba, Croatia, Jamaica, Haiti, Puerto Rico, the Lesser Antilles, Belize, Honduras, and Panama, among others. In many of these cases, the results were moderately successful. However, some stories, such as that of Hawaii, reveal the devastating consequences of introducing invasive species without proper planning. In the mid-19th century, Hawaii's economy depended heavily on one key product, sugarcane. This crop, known for its sweetness and versatility, was the primary economic driver of the archipelago. However, farmers faced an implacable enemy, rats. Attracted by the sweet taste of sugarcane stalks, rats not only consumed large quantities of the product, but also damaged the plants, significantly reducing crop yields. In the 1870s, Hawaiian farmers, desperate for a solution, heard about successes in the Caribbean where sugar producers had introduced mongooses to control rats. Reports indicated that Indian mongooses brought to the Caribbean had reduced rat populations on plantations, minimizing crop damage. For Hawaiian farmers, the idea seemed simple and appealing: bring mongooses to solve the problem. In 1883, 72 mongooses were brought from Jamaica and released on Hawaii's Big Island. Farmers hoped these creatures would do what they were known for: hunt and consume rats. Optimistically, they began distributing mongoose offspring to other islands in the archipelago, including Maui, Molokai, and Oahu. Not everyone was convinced. Some local experts raised concerns, noting the lack of detailed studies on how mongooses might behave in Hawaii. These warnings were ignored, and the consequences quickly became apparent. It soon became clear that the mongooses and the rats did not interact at all. While rats are nocturnal, active only at night, mongooses are diurnal hunters that operate solely during daylight. This mismatch in activity schedules meant that mongooses did not address the rat problem, leaving farmers without a solution to protect their sugarcane crops. Instead of hunting rats, the mongooses began attacking Hawaii's endemic species. Numerous native birds, already facing other environmental challenges, saw their populations drastically reduced. Mongooses also preyed on sea turtle eggs, wiping out entire generations of these vulnerable species. The impact of mongooses in Hawaii has been devastating. Recent estimates suggest that these predators are responsible for the extinction of at least 8 species of native birds, all listed on the Federal Endangered Species List. Additionally, mongooses disrupted ecological dynamics by attacking reptiles, small mammals, and insects, affecting food chains at multiple levels. To curb their impact, authorities installed physical barriers in nature reserves and protected areas to prevent mongooses from entering these spaces. However, these efforts came too late. Controlling the mongoose population, which had reproduced unchecked for decades, has become so challenging that many consider the task nearly impossible. Hawaii was not the only place where the introduction of mongooses caused problems. In Jamaica, a British colonist introduced mongooses in 1872 to protect his sugar plantation from rats. Although it initially seemed like an effective solution, unforeseen consequences soon emerged. The mongooses began hunting local birds and reptiles, drastically reducing their populations. This, in turn, eliminated natural predators of insects and arthropods. As a result, Jamaica experienced a massive outbreak of ticks, which brought new diseases and affected both humans and domestic animals. British authorities downplayed the problem, claiming that ticks would attack the mongooses and that the natural balance would eventually be restored. However, this response provided no real solutions, leaving Jamaica with an altered ecosystem and new biological threats. Although technically introduced to control a pest, the Hawaiian government does not classify this action as biological control. The reason is that the mongooses were never subjected to scientific evaluation before being brought to the archipelago. Unlike other successful cases of biological control, where species are thoroughly studied before release, the mongooses were introduced hastily and without consideration for potential side effects. The case of invasive mongooses is not limited to a single location. These small predators have left their mark on multiple ecosystems, especially on Caribbean islands. On 4 small islands in the Caribbean Sea, the St. Croix ground lizards lived for centuries among fallen leaves, foraging for food and defending their territory. However, their story took a tragic turn when mongooses were introduced. On their namesake island, the lizards were completely wiped out, victims of the mongooses and urban expansion that destroyed their habitat. On 2 neighboring islands, the situation was slightly less dire. Only about 400 lizards remained, struggling to survive. The threat was imminent, but the alarm was sounded in time. Conservationists and scientists worked to relocate the lizards to safe areas, successfully increasing their population to nearly 3,000 individuals. This effort is an example of how, with resources and commitment, ecosystems damaged by invasive species can recover, albeit never without significant cost. Scientists are now attempting a more ambitious step, reintroducing these lizards to their native island, a process that still faces many challenges. Although mongooses are known today primarily as an invasive threat, their relationship with humans dates back thousands of years. A recent study of Egyptian tombs dating back 4,000 years revealed a fascinating depiction: a human leading what appears to be a mongoose on a leash. This discovery is unique in Egyptian art and raises many questions. The drawing clearly shows the mongoose wearing a collar, an unusual detail given that these creatures have never been fully domesticated. However, it is known that some cultures kept mongooses as pets due to their ability to control pests such as snakes and rodents. Interestingly, scientists suggest that the mongoose in this drawing may have been used to scare off birds in crop fields or during hunting. Still, its exact purpose remains a mystery, as the same drawing includes other animals, such as what might be a dog or even a hornless goat, also tethered. This detail adds a level of complexity that intrigues both archaeologists and biologists. The use of mongooses as pest controllers has persisted for centuries, but in Sri Lanka, someone proposed a completely different application: training them to detect illegal substances. This pilot project was funded with a $50,000 grant from the US State Department. The idea was to release mongooses into shipping containers filled with auto parts. Their training involved sniffing the containers, and if they found something suspicious, they would react by raising their tails as a warning signal. Although it might sound unusual, initial tests were successful. The mongooses proved capable of identifying specific substances, and the potential of the project generated enthusiasm. Unfortunately, political issues and changes in leadership prevented the program from advancing beyond initial trials. Despite this, the idea of police mongooses remains an innovative concept that could have become a unique example of biological control with a completely different purpose. The impact of mongooses on Caribbean islands extends beyond the St. Croix lizards. In Jamaica, for example, mongooses, introduced to control rats in sugar plantations, caused an unexpected side effect: a massive tick outbreak. The problem arose because mongooses eliminated many of the natural predators of insects and arthropods, such as local birds and reptiles. This allowed tick populations to grow unchecked, affecting both humans and domestic animals. Although authorities attempted to downplay the issue, the situation underscored how introducing a species without thorough analysis can trigger a domino effect of negative consequences. Across all these stories, one constant is evident: invasive species not only affect biodiversity, but also impose significant costs in terms of time, money, and human effort. Restoring an ecosystem damaged by a poorly planned introduction requires immense resources, and in many cases, the results are limited. The case of the St. Croix ground lizards is a hopeful example, but the effort required to achieve such successes cannot be underestimated. From relocating individuals to efforts to recreate suitable habitats, every step of the process faces logistical and ecological challenges. On the other hand, the case of Sri Lanka illustrates how human creativity can find new applications for these creatures, even if external factors can halt their development. Meanwhile, stories like those of Jamaica and Hawaii serve as warnings about the fragility of island ecosystems and the risks of disrupting their natural balance. Although mongooses have been eradicated in some places, such as Japan, their presence remains a global threat in many other regions. The experience of Amami Oshima, where eradication was achieved, and the failures in places like Hawaii and the Caribbean highlight the importance of making science-based, well-planned decisions before introducing any species into a new ecosystem. Current efforts to mitigate the damage caused by mongooses are ongoing in various parts of the world, and each lesson learned helps prevent future mistakes from repeating the devastating consequences we have witnessed. The use of mongooses as a tool for biological control has caused problems not only in Japan and Hawaii, but also in many other countries and territories. The cases of Jamaica, the Caribbean, and other islands demonstrate how introducing foreign species, even with good intentions, can trigger an ecological crisis. Mongooses lack natural predators in these regions, allowing them to reproduce rapidly and disrupt local ecosystems. The consequences include 1. Loss of native species. Mongooses are opportunistic carnivores that attack smaller and more vulnerable animals. In many Caribbean islands, their introduction resulted in the local extinction of several bird, reptile, and small mammal species, triggering a domino effect on ecological balance. 2. Impact on farmers. Although introduced to control pests like rats and snakes, mongooses often attack poultry and damage crops, affecting rural economies. They also transmit diseases, creating public health problems. 3. Lessons learned. Experiences in places like Amami Oshima and Hawaii have underscored the importance of careful planning in the use of biological control. Today, much stricter protocols are in place before introducing any species into an ecosystem, with an emphasis on long-term research and risk assessment. Other examples of problematic biological control. The story of mongooses is not an isolated case. Here are other examples where the introduction of foreign species to solve a problem ended up creating new ones. 1. Cane toad in Australia. In 1935, cane toads, Rhinella marina, were introduced to Australia from Hawaii to control beetles damaging sugarcane crops. However, this initiative backfired. Cane toads reproduced rapidly and spread across vast regions of the country, negatively impacting native fauna. Their venom proved lethal to many local predators unadapted to this new threat. Today, the cane toad is considered one of Australia's most harmful invasive species, and its control remains a significant challenge for environmental authorities. 2. Rabbits in Australia. In the 19th century, European settlers introduced rabbits to Australia for recreational hunting. The absence of natural predators and favorable environmental conditions led to a population explosion. Rabbits devastated large areas of vegetation, causing soil erosion and negatively affecting local biodiversity. To mitigate the issue, foxes were introduced as rabbit predators. However, the foxes preferred hunting more vulnerable native species, exacerbating the ecological crisis. This case highlights the complexity and risks of using exotic species for biological control without a thorough evaluation of potential consequences. 3. African giant snail. The African giant snail, Achatina fulica, was introduced to various regions as a food source and in some cases for commercial purposes. However, its adaptability and rapid reproduction turned it into a devastating agricultural pest in many parts of the world, including the Caribbean and Asia. In addition to crop damage, this mollusk carries parasites that can transmit diseases to humans, such as eosinophilic meningitis. Its control poses a significant challenge for health and agricultural authorities, requiring comprehensive measures to prevent its spread and mitigate its adverse effects. The challenge of eradicating invasive species. Eliminating an invasive species once it has established itself is an extremely complex task. In the case of Amami Oshima, the success of mongoose eradication was exceptional for several reasons. 1. Sustained effort. Japan invested decades of continuous work, employing a combination of methods, including specialized traps, toxic baits, advanced monitoring, and community participation. 2. Technology and innovation traps, specifically designed for mongooses, minimized the impact on other local species. Additionally, trained dogs and advanced monitoring systems were used to track the animals. 3. Community collaboration. Engaging the local population was crucial to the project's success. Communities actively participated in capture and monitoring efforts. However, not all initiatives achieve the same level of success. In many cases, invasive species quickly adapt to control methods, or the affected area is too large to manage effectively. This underscores the importance of prevention as the best strategy against invasive species. The way forward. As the world faces growing environmental challenges, biological control remains a valuable tool, but it requires careful, evidence-based implementation. Cases like the mongooses in Amami Oshima demonstrate that, with sufficient effort and resources, it is possible to reverse some of the damage caused by past decisions. However, for many areas, it is already too late. Invasive species continue to be one of the greatest threats to global biodiversity, and combating them requires international collaboration, public education, and a preventive approach. And that's how we wrap up this fascinating story of the mongooses in Amami Oshima, a clear lesson on how a poorly planned solution can turn into a major problem. What do you think about this incredible struggle to restore balance to the ecosystem? Leave us your comments. We'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss more amazing stories like this one. See you in the next video. Bye for now.